In my late 20s and 30s, I faced a string of traumatic major life events. It felt like I was on a roller coaster of emotional ups and downs. Do you want to know what happened? Okay, then buckle up, because here we go. I was so excited when my husband Tracy got out of the Air Force and was hired by American Airlines. We were moving out of frigid North Dakota to sunny Dallas-Fort Worth. But I was anxious because I was 7 months pregnant and I had to find a new doctor for my baby. But I pressed on. 2 months later, I was elated when I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl, Katie, and I was accepted into a PhD program. But during my PhD program, I was gripped with sadness when Tracy, who at the time was also a pilot in the Air Force Reserves, was one of the first to be called up to serve in Desert Storm. This is a photo of Katie and me, taken right after Tracy's plane took off for the Middle East. As you can see, I was pretty depressed, but I pressed on. While he was deployed, I had painful major surgery where my mouth was wired shut for a very long 6-week period of recovery. But I pressed on. This is probably one of the more flattering photos of me taken during that time. A few months later, good news came. Tracy was coming home. Oh no, it was because he got hit by a truck. He must be bedridden for weeks to heal his back. I took care of him while frantically finishing my coursework and caring for Katie, all the while worrying whether he'd fully recover or ever fly again. And I pressed on. Soon I was honored when I was awarded a government grant from the Department of Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, that funded my doctoral dissertation research. Then, my dear sweet mother, who always showed unconditional love for me, suddenly died. I felt incredibly alone and heartbroken, but I pressed on, traveling across the country for various job interviews. 8 months later, I landed my dream job at Northern Illinois University's College of Business. We were moving to Chicago, and then came the straw that broke the camel's back. 1 week into the start of my new teaching job, which was the 1-year anniversary of my mother's death, my devoted and grieving father died by his own hand. After the funeral, I pressed on. I was feeling tremendous pressure to publish and make tenure. I didn't have time for grief counseling. I was pregnant again, and I didn't even have time for morning sickness. But as you can imagine, Tracy always tries to bring some levity and costumes to any situation, even during my contractions. Anyway, next slide. This is a photo of our precious new baby, Kristin, with her proud big sister, Katie, and me. Even though being a mother has always been my #1 priority, I still efficiently and effectively juggled my work and home life. I continued to research and to publish and to teach, and by God, I made tenure in a male-dominated career field. Tracy even threw me a surprise party to celebrate my accomplishments. Whew. Now that that pressure was lifted, I needed to devote time and energy to explore and begin to deal with all that trauma that I had been pushing away for decades. But I had no idea how or where to begin. So first, I turned to my Catholic upbringing for answers. You see, I was raised Catholic. In fact, my mother's sister was a nun, and she was also my first-grade teacher. So this is a picture of my aunt, Sister Samuela, and me on my first communion. I even attended a Jesuit university Gonzaga University in my hometown of Spokane, Washington, for both my undergraduate degree and my MBA. I loved my Jesuit Catholic tradition. It had always brought me a lot of comfort and joy. But after leaving Spokane, I never found the same type of liberal Catholic experience that I had been taught by the Jesuits. Not in North Dakota, not in Texas, and not in Illinois. Rather than helping me to find comfort and healing, I was finding the Catholic Church to be triggering for me after my parents died. I specifically remember the last time that I set foot in a Catholic church. Actually, I walked out in the middle of the priest's sermon. He was preaching about how people who commit suicide are going to hell. I was livid. I remember grabbing Tracy's arm and saying, "We have to get out of here." I was so enraged. You know what I did? Yeah, I called the church that day. I'm not sure all that I said, but it was something like, you know, my Jesuit tradition taught me about a loving and forgiving God, not a judgmental and vengeful one. If that's the God at your church, I don't want him. I remember going on ranting for quite a while. I can't remember all that I said, but the wrath of Kathy's bottled up anger and pain came crashing down on that priest's answering machine. Never did get a call back, but then I didn't leave my name. A lot of other strong emotions started coming up for me during that period. I felt heavy sorrow for losing my parents. I felt outrage at Jesus for abandoning my father in his sadness. I felt resentment and anger towards my father for abandoning me. And I felt unbearable grief and shame for focusing on myself and not being there to support my father. My emotions were getting out of control. I couldn't talk about my feelings without doing this. So, while the specifics of my experience are unique to me, many of you probably have felt like being on a roller coaster of highs and lows at some point in your life. Think of a time when you experienced some form of sadness, disappointment, or grief. What happened next? Did you short-circuit the experience with a distraction, like burying your head in your work, reaching for your cell phone, or binging on Netflix? Did you try to numb the pain by having a few too many drinks? Did it work? Did you label your experience as bad, unfair, or wrong? Did you wrap your head around some storyline, one that involved blaming yourself or someone else and lashing out in unconscious anger? Did you fight with reality? These are all typical strategies that people like me tend to use. But at some point, we all must face the fact that we can't control our experiences. People will say things to hurt us. We won't always get our way. People will abandon us. I wanted to learn how to better deal with my painful past that kept creeping into the present moment. How could I learn to stay present to pain, however intense, without anxiously pushing away the pain or grasping for the pleasure? How could I stop jumping on the ride? Or at least, how could I make the ride less turbulent? People often say that pain and suffering are the catalyst to spiritual work, and that was certainly the case for me. I was still searching for a spiritual solution. Obviously, we needed to find a new church, so we did a lot of shopping around at various denominations. We finally landed at UUSG in 1999. During our first year here, a church member was in the pulpit one summer Sunday. Some of you may remember Donna Roman. She moved to Minnesota many years ago. Donna was giving a sermon on Buddhism and explaining some of the teachings and practices. I was intrigued. I introduced myself to her after the sermon, and I asked her if she'd ever considered leading a meditation class. And soon began our Wednesday night meditation and book discussion group led by Donna Roman here at our church. When I first started to meditate in that class, I couldn't do it. I could not sit still and slow down my thoughts. I remember having to stand up and walk around. I think I was actually pacing. I had so much pent-up energy that my whole body was buzzing. I had kept myself so busy that I had never given myself an opportunity to feel all that tension and emotion that was stored in my body. I wasn't used to slowing down. My life had been too hectic. At first, I was really afraid that I would never be able to sit still and meditate, but I pressed on. These meditation classes and the many books we read, from Tara Brach to Eckhart Tolle and so many more, gave me concrete, practical tools for moving beyond my dark cloud of grief, anxiety, and pain. I learned how to pause and hold my emotions in loving awareness. I learned to stop believing those negative thoughts and stories that I was telling myself. And I learned how to use my breath as an anchor to calm me down. But more importantly, I learned to love myself. I found the path to liberation from my pain and suffering in the teachings and practices of Buddhism that I learned here at the Unitarian Universalist Society of Geneva. During my Buddhist studies, I was taught a Buddhist parable about dealing with suffering more skillfully. The Buddhists say that any time you suffer misfortune, 2 arrows can fly your way. The first arrow represents something bad that happens. You receive a hurtful comment. You lose your job. Someone you love dies. The second arrow is how you choose to react to the first arrow, the story you tell yourself about that negative experience. It was my fault, or I can't believe he would do such a thing, or this shouldn't be happening. If you react negatively to a bad experience by blaming, complaining, or getting angry, you release the second arrow onto yourself. While the first arrow happens to everyone and is unavoidable in life, the second arrow is optional. You can't control your circumstances, but you have a choice in how you react as to not amplify the hurt from the first arrow. I really took this teaching to heart. I couldn't change what had happened to my parents. I couldn't avoid painful surgery. I couldn't prevent someone from saying a hurtful comment to me, and yet I could see that I was shooting that second arrow and making things much worse for myself. I wanted with all my heart to stop doing this in all aspects of my life. So I was determined to reconcile within myself the fear, anxiety, and grief that I was carrying inside my body because it was being released in unconscious and hurtful ways. I could see that some of my relationships were suffering. The process of dealing with this turbulent time took many years and a lot of work. Besides Donna's class, I went on many meditation retreats. I tried yoga. I attended the Reiki Share and got attuned here at our church. I joined the Buddhist meditation and study group led by Lisa Gaddis. I meditated regularly. I worked with a variety of practitioners to help me to release my pain. It was a slow, gradual process that has taken many years and a lot of work. I no longer feel gripped by the past. During the pandemic, I started regularly attending a Unitarian Universalist mindfulness group that still meets every morning from 8:30 to 9 via Zoom to meditate together for 20 minutes and share readings and reflections. Being part of a Sangha, which is a group of people that meditate together and support each other's spiritual practice, has been especially helpful for me. People often ask me, why do you meditate? What's the benefit? Do you really have that kind of time? How can I not make the time? It's the most important thing I do. It starts my day off right, reminding me of the tools available to me, which impacts the quality of my entire life. It's kind of like a regular physical exercise routine. You don't see results every day, but over time, you just notice that you feel a lot better. It's kind of like that. My mindfulness practices helped me to be more present to not only my meditations, but more importantly in my daily life. I used to think that by meditating, I'd no longer have negative thoughts, I'd no longer have fear, I'd no longer be anxious. That was silly. Those emotions serve a purpose. Instead, meditation has taught me how to better handle those emotions when they come up. For instance, the strategies I learned really came in handy during COVID, when I'd wake up in the middle of the night with scary thoughts. Did that ever happen to you? I could see that my thoughts were starting to get out of control, so I would shift my focus to my breath, or I might repeat a mantra like, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be peaceful. Focusing on my breath or positive thoughts always helps me to calm down. I would tell myself, it's okay to feel scared, so stop judging yourself for feeling that way. Remember, you don't want to suppress your feelings, but you don't want to act on them either. Then I would ask myself, is there anything wrong right now? The answer was no. Everyone I loved was still okay and I wasn't sick. That brought me back to the present moment. Mindfulness also helps me to calm down whenever I start to get angry with someone else. Instead of going off on them, making a snide comment, or blaming them for my feelings, which has been an ingrained habit for me, I try to remind myself to pause and stay present so that I can catch my reaction. I watch the emotions that are coming up. I ask myself, where am I feeling it in my body? Most of the time, it feels like my head's gonna explode. Other times, it just really hurts in my heart. But if I notice what's going on in my body, and in regard to my thoughts as well, I have a choice. I can then say to myself, I'm willing to accept this uncomfortable feeling for now. I choose to let it be there without feeding it with more negative thoughts, ignoring it, or getting rid of it with negative words or actions, the second arrow. I learned the secret is to be kind to myself and to accept the fact that I'm feeling uncomfortable, and that's okay. It won't last. It won't kill me. If I can accept it, not judge it, and breathe through that uncomfortable feeling, I have noticed that it typically has a very short life, and then it goes away. I tell myself, it's raining now, but that's okay because the rain will stop. Nothing lasts forever. Once the emotion is past, I will be able to see things more clearly and to respond more skillfully to what just happened. There are plenty of opportunities to practice, as many situations can lead to an upset or uncomfortable feeling. But whenever I remember to pause and go through the process, it works. Similarly, I have learned the importance of paying attention to the power of words, because words matter and they impact others. I was not taught this in my childhood. I witnessed a lot of yelling and hurtful speech in my formative years. My hot-blooded Italian and Hungarian relatives would say a lot of hurtful things to one another, and then all was forgiven. So while I learned to forgive more easily, remembering to pause when I speak, especially when I'm upset, has been an ongoing challenge for me. I make my share of mistakes, and I certainly don't always live in the present moment or remember to pause when I feel attacked or misunderstood. I still say things I shouldn't have said. But the more I practice mindfulness in my daily life, and the more I sit in meditation, the better I'm getting at it. I've also noticed that it offers me more clarity on what is most important to me, such as developing deeper and more loving relationships, being present and compassionate in all my interactions, and letting go of my ego and need to be right. It all started as a way to help lift me out of my grief, anxiety, and pain. It cleared the dark cloud that had built up around me. Why do I continue with meditation and mindfulness? Because it has made my life better. I feel more joy, more love, more gratitude. I'm more patient, more compassionate, and more available to others than I used to be. I hope that by working on myself, it might benefit those around me, and possibly even light a path for others to consider. So thank you.
Visit us at UUSG.org.